This episode is brought to you by True America Multifamily, one of the nation's leading multifamily investment firms, with nearly 60,000 attainable rental housing units under management. This month, True America celebrates its 13-year anniversary with a commitment to building better communities. On today's episode, Bill McMorrow, Chairman and CEO of Kennedy Wilson, joins Bob on the podcast.
Well, welcome to Building Better Communities by none other than Bob Hart. My special guest today is I consider you a friend, a mentor, and an international real estate icon, Bill McMorrow, Chairman of Kennedy Wilson, a job he bought himself for 37 years ago in 1988, when Kennedy Wilson had, I think, 11 people and a few partners, and really started out as an auction company. So, Bill, let's talk a little bit about the history of Kennedy Wilson and how you transformed it into an international real estate company across continents, and really returning to your roots in the banking industry now as well.
Well, Bob, first of all, thank you for having me. I think, Bob, you and I have a lot of commonality in how we kind of grew up, and as you know, I'm one of 9 kids. I had a really wonderful set of parents, so I got lucky. I had 2 great parents.
And your ancestors come from Boston, so we have that in common too.
They came from Boston. My roots are in Boston. My roots are in Ireland. But I think more than anything, it really taught me my dad was a very disciplined person, but it taught me to work hard and have a job from the time I was 8 years old, a real job.
I know your grandfather was a Boston
He was a policeman in Boston. My dad was a Navy fighter pilot in the Second World War. But I think more than anything, it really, taught me how to work on a team. And I was very lucky because back in those days, Bob, it wasn't like optionality in terms of where you wanted to go to school and what you wanted to think.
I've heard those stories from you. You do what your parents say
you were
do.
told what to do, and that was it. And I got set on this great path of going to Catholic grade schools, but then there was only one school I could go to high school at, according to my dad. And we didn't debate it. I was going to
school in Venice Boulevard.
I was going to Venice Boulevard, and since I was playing sports, I was going to live there.
How'd you get there?
How did I get there? I got in a car. They drove me there and dropped me off and left me when I was 14 years old. And so that was, really the beginning of the journey. And then, USC played a very huge role in that early part of my life. But, I like you, Bob, I always had to do jobs to make money.
Yes, I know one of the early ones was down in the meatpacking district, and that's why you don't eat meat anymore.
We had to do jobs, and so I think when I think back on my banking career, the early part of it was really just the 50 job interviews and 1 job offer, and everybody says, "Well, what'd you do?" I said, "I took it because I needed to get a job." And so I started in the banking industry.
Was that your job in Philadelphia?
It was here in California.
Okay.
So I had graduated from graduate school at USC and thought I could,
With a stopover at Gonzaga, though.
I stopped there, but when I graduated from USC, I thought I could get a job anywhere, but of course it was a bad time in the job market.
Yeah, that
so
was
I got 1 job
late
offer.
60s, early 70s.
1970.
Yeah.
And but it turned out to be a blessing because I moved to San Francisco. I got out of LA for a while.
What bank was that then? Crocker?
Crocker Bank that
great old
ultimately
name in
became owned by
California.
Wells.
Yes.
And so through a series of lucky events, luck plays such an important part in all of our lives. I met a guy when I was 25 who asked me if I wanted to move back to Philadelphia and run their corporate lending group when I was 25 years old.
With an MBA.
But not enough experience I had enough experience to be dangerous, but I had gained somewhat of a reputation of being able to bring in business and to do business with good clients.
And that was before real estate, really. You were really.
We were lending money to Fortune 500 companies, middle market companies. These were all unsecured loans, primarily.
Right. This was corporate lending.
Corporate lending, but I really never went on an airplane until I was 18 years old because of
Me either.
9 kids.
Yeah.
And so here I am. I'm now living in Philadelphia, but we owned a bank in New York City, and we owned a bank in France. And I'm 25 years old, and now I'm getting to see that there's actually another place outside of California where there's real people. And real
Philadelphia
companies.
has real people.
And there we had a big corporate base there. And so the experience I had of being, learning about New York, being in Philadelphia, seeing Europe, was such an eye-opener to me. And so I'm telling you all of this because it really is how Kennedy Wilson has evolved.
Exactly.
And
you were banking John Wilson and Don Kennedy.
Well,
after you came back to California.
They were helping me work out real estate problems in 1980 when Prime got to 21.
I remember that.
I wanted to move
During
back
Reagan.
to California.
Yeah.
And Imperial Bank, which was controlled by the Graziadillo family,
Right.
the Pepperdine Business School is named after, George met me and asked me to come and basically take over running the asset side of the bank.
So that's when you left Fidelity.
That's when I left Fidelity. I came back to California.
And you were probably about 30
I was
then?
31.
31, yeah.
And so, but here we are in a war. In 1980, 21% with 75%.
Not that high.
75% of our loans were to real estate people.
Right.
So you can imagine what that was like. But that was really where I learned real estate.
On the workout side.
And on the workout side, but we were taking it all back. Nobody could pay the interest.
They were just handing you the
They
keys.
were just
back.
handing the keys in. And the bank was under a regulatory agreement. And so I had to learn how to work with the regulators. So when you think about Kennedy Wilson that I was able to buy in 1988, it was a small auction company that was auctioning primarily residential real estate condos.
And European antiquities is how they started. Didn't Wilson start that way?
That was the separate business.
Oh, I see.
And they had started this architectural antique auction company.
Right.
That was doing really, really well. And the real estate auction business was just kind of an afterthought. And they sold it for $1 to Bill Stevenson, who I bought the company from, for $1 million in 1988.
Was he the Australian guy? Or was that the
No,
other?
that was
The other.
Ken. But Bill,
Ken.
unfortunately, since passed away. But
Yeah.
this is where luck happens to everybody in life. In a very small company, the second night I was at the company, I was going home and I said to one of the 11 people, I said, if you ever find any condominium projects in California that we can buy, I said, I've got capital, and the capital was coming from my mentor, George Graziadillo.
But you left the bank to
I'm
take
out of the
over
bank.
Kennedy
I
Wilson
bought
full
Kennedy
time.
Wilson. Second night I owned the company.
That had to be a big, scary thing to do, to leave the comfort of the bank.
It's hard to go out of an institutional environment and into an entrepreneur. It's very hard.
Yeah.
And but so this is where luck plays such a part. I say to this guy, he comes in the next day. He says, "I found 2." Really? Where are they? One's in Palm Springs. One's in Vallejo. And I called up George and I said, "Hey, I need the capital to buy these 2." And he says, "Fine, I want to look at the one in Palm Springs because I have a home out in the Palm Desert area."
Now, what are rates now? They probably moved down a little bit by then.
This was 1988.
so this is all the way to 88
This
now.
is now all to 88. I'm out of the bank. I own Kennedy Wilson. We are doing $1 million a year of revenue. And second day, this guy comes in, and George goes and sees George was in his 60s, and I'm still in my 30s.
Right.
Called me up and he says, "Stupidest deal I've ever seen. I'm not giving you the money." And I said, you got to give me the money. I'm buying it.
What was the relative value then for these condos?
60 condos with pools, and we had pro forma'd these to sell for $135,000 a piece.
Oh my God.
But he says, stupid deal, not giving you the money. I finally convinced him. He said, I'll give you the money. I don't want to be your partner. You're going to lose your you-know-what. But
he gave you the money?
He said, I'll loan you the money, and you have to sign on the whole thing personally. And I said, okay, fine. So on auction day, there were 800 bidders. So
because this was REO.
We bought it from a bank.
Yeah. How many bidders? 800?
800.
Holy moly.
First unit sold for $265,000. Remember I told you that I pro forma'd them at $135?
Yeah.
First one sold for $265. And that was what happened that day.
So you were not only the owner at that point, you were selling them through Kennedy Wilson.
We were buying our own inventory.
Right.
Fixing it up and running it back through the auction company. Right. And we were doing this a lot. And so you would typically own these properties for 6 months. And so, not to get into too much detail, but it ended up being quite a success. And off of that, I decided that the auction business really made sense and we needed to bring in more business development people.
And that's where really the eye grew to Kennedy Wilson International, because you were starting to go global again at that point.
Not quite at that point in time, but in 1990 there was a savings and loan crisis.
Right, the RTC.
And the federal government took over many, many, many savings and loans. And so I hired 64 people into our business development department in 6 months. And the $1 million of revenue went to 30 in a year.
Annual revenue.
Yeah, but we were making good profit margins on this. And so it was kind of one thing after another, Bob, and where the international part came in was in 1994, I was asked by a Japanese company in Orange County to do an auction. But they said you have to go to Japan to get the bank's approval. So I went to Japan by myself in 1994. And I decided since I was there, I might as well talk to as many banks as I could. And honestly, this was a period of time in the United States where the Japanese were buying every piece of real estate. And there were bills floating around in the Congress to prohibit the Japanese from buying all of our trophy assets.
They bought Pebble Beach, they bought Riviera, they were buying everything.
Beach, anything. And so I get over there and I said to myself after I had finished talking to all these banks, these are really making some crazy loans. We should open an office here. And so...
Is that when you met Homasan?
I hired him in 1995. And...
how did you get acquainted with him?
I met him through, it was the luckiest thing ever. I met him through a headhunter. Our office was in Santa Monica at the time.
I remember, on Ocean Park.
I was having a very difficult time finding somebody to lead that business, and he came to my office, and after 15 minutes I said, listen, Rio, you are not leaving this office until you agree to come to Kennedy Wilson.
I've been to that office in
And
Santa
so
Monica.
he said, no, I got to think about it.
Sure, he's a Japanese guy.
I said, there's nothing to think about. Anyway, I finally, after a little while, convinced him, and then
he'd been a Mitsubishi guy.
He was,
Yeah.
and he unfortunately has passed away, but he was the most amazing friend and leader, and just a prolific business development guy.
He didn't even have a clue then the ride he would be on, because that gave the seed to forming Kennedy Wilson Japan Public Company.
He was just an amazing human being. And then other lucky things happened, and we were able to get some capital to go to Japan and buy office buildings.
So really it started out as an asset manager acquirer.
It started out really as a brokerage business where we were or a purchasing business here in California or Hawaii, where the Japanese banks were taking back properties from their customers. We were buying real estate from them. here in the States.
Uh-huh.
And then in some cases acting as the broker. Like we sold the Tiffany building in New York.
I remember
for a
that.
Japanese company.
That was a huge deal, I remember.
And so that was the start of it. But then in 1997, I got a friend of mine to give us equity capital to buy real estate in Tokyo.
So you're really onshore and offshore.
Eventually we got onshore.
Yeah.
And so last week they celebrated their 30th anniversary of the founding of this company. And in 2002 it became a public company.
Right, that's when you exited the first time.
2004.
2004.
Yeah, but alongside the exit, we started buying apartment buildings ourselves.
Right.
And we bought 50 apartment buildings in Tokyo.
Yeah, I think I was there for a few of those.
Yeah, and so it's just all these things, Bob, are such, you've got your own stories. They're all just, there's such an element of luck and putting yourself out there.
Well, it's more than luck, Bill. I think it's vision. I think you've always had a vision to see ahead, and you've not been afraid of bad cycles. You've actually used them to your advantage.
You have to be able to look past.
Yeah.
If you can't look past the moment you're in, you're going nowhere. And it's like today, I think all of us, I don't think there's any person in this country, if they weren't honest with each other, that wouldn't say, this is a crazy period of time. But we've all lived in a period of time now for 5 years where we went through a pandemic, remote working. Now we're not having remote working. We're all back in the office,
Most of us
and
are.
then
Yeah.
we're going through whatever you want to, this period where
With social upheaval, too.
there's a lot going on. It's a lot for human beings to cope with. And so I was telling everybody this morning at my office, look, you have to recognize that this won't go on forever. There will be a beginning, which there is, and there'll be an end. I don't know when the end is, but there'll be an end. And so
There always is.
what are you going to do in between?
Well, in your case, launch 2 public companies, take them private, go to Europe, go to Japan, and it seems like you've been able to navigate through change and growth and uncertainty to create a very large international company. In fact, I have a photo right behind you.
I see it. I noticed that was a fun day for us.
That was fun. But to go from NASDAQ to NYSE,
yeah.
and I have the medallion to prove it here.
Well, you and I have a lot of great history together. We really do. And so we're in another one of those periods of time.
Yeah.
And so this one is, everyone seems to be a little different. This one has a lot of chaos attached to it.
Yes, it does.
And
But I've seen you operate in chaos. Okay, so we're done with Japan. Then we launched the apartment business in Japan with none other than Wachovia.
yeah,
And then
they go down.
They go down. I'll never forget the trip that we went on because you had a bad feeling that they weren't going to step up at a certain point.
Right.
And we'll leave the names out of it,
Yeah.
protect the innocent.
Please.
But I'll never forget, we landed about 3 o'clock in Charlotte, and I think we were starving because we hadn't had food. So we're at Ruth Chris, and you said, I'm done, I'm not waiting for my food, we're heading over there now, and we're gonna handle this thing. And you were ahead of the curve because you knew they weren't gonna write a check anymore. Things were in a difficult spot.
It was, there's so many stories, over all these years. I'll probably bore everybody else, Bob, but
Well, I think they're good. I think they're good learning experiences.
Look, I'm sure you can say the same thing. I've never had a day off in my career at Kennedy Wilson. I'm doing something every single day.
And you're usually the first one at the office.
Pretty much. And so it's, there's just this, are you willing to work hard, and will you get some luck along the way? And do you have people around you, just like you were with me, you have people around you that are really good at what they do.
They have to be better than good, though, Bill. I think they have to be, in your world, entrepreneurial and largely positive, because I think you thrive on good energy.
Look, I tell my son Tyler, I said, there's only two things in life that I don't want you to do. I don't want you to hang around negative people, and I don't want you to hang around phony people. And I said, if you can do those two things in your life and create relationships with people along the way that are positive, you'll always figure it out. You're a textbook case of somebody that knows how to, figure it out.
You figure it out.
You figure
Every
it
day
out.
you're figuring out something new, whether it's a banking issue or
you're figuring out
a partner issue or an employee
something.
issue. Well, let's go back to the GFC for a second, because
Yeah.
you went public just as the GFC was kind of in its midst. Remember, we did the SPAC.
Yeah,
And we
October.
got it over the goal line because you had the vision that the company could take advantage of dislocation if it could raise capital. That was
October of 2009.
that took a lot of
You were part
what.
of it.
I was part of it. We were all there. But that money, which by today's standards would be, I mean, you're making loans probably bigger than the cash out.
That's right.
But you use that in such a way that it allows us, because I was helping you do some of the workouts.
Well, you
and things
remember
we had to
what
do.
we had to do the last week, don't you, before
Oh,
that
yeah.
happened?
Oh,
we
yeah.
all had to go get money.
We all had to go get money. We all had to go get money to make it happen.
Yeah. Remember?
I do.
Yeah.
But if that wasn't enough to go public, you then decided to go to Europe
Luck.
because they were in a worse situation.
They were.
And you picked Ireland.
It was like I had an Irish friend that was a part of a prominent political family here in the United States.
Yes.
And I read an article about what was going on in Ireland. And I knew he knew some very famous musical people in Ireland. And I
Yeah.
called him up and I said, hey, Bobby, would you mind having coffee with me on a Sunday? And he says, sure. I said, I've been reading about Ireland. Can you set up some meetings for me and go with me?
I remember.
And so I go with Bobby, and it was the
But it was very
it was winter
early.
It was winter of 2010.
Yeah.
And
NAMA had just been formed.
yeah, and I got over there, and in the second meeting, I was talking to this banker.
Richard.
No, it
No,
wasn't
not
Richie. It was one of his underlings.
Okay.
A guy named Ben, and I was telling him the story about how we created this business in Japan. And I said, look, the thing that has to happen in our business is I have to have our own team on the ground. Can't do it any other way. He goes, I have an idea for you. And so we bought the Bank of Ireland's real estate asset management division.
I know that.
I made a deal with him that same day.
I know the price, too.
Yeah.
You got a
No,
good deal, Bill.
don't say the
I
price.
won't.
But anyway, so we buy that, and
But you got a lot of good people, too.
there were 14.
Which was the key.
14. But we had our income stream, and I had learned from Japan where it's very hard to start a business with no income.
Particularly real estate business, which
Yeah.
can be a
So-
pig and devour cash.
So on June 29th of 2011, we closed, and I asked if I could meet the CEO of the bank.
Oh, so you hadn't met Richard
Never met
yet.
him. I wanted to thank him for selling me the business.
I think he was thanking you a couple years later when you
He
saved the
definitely
bank.
was, but this is, I go to meet him,
Yeah.
one question,
From him.
me,
Oh, from you.
how's everything going? Horrible, he says.
They were under pressure.
I said, really, why? I knew why, but I said, why? And he said, I need capital. And I said, okay, who's helping you? And he told me this very well-known Wall Street house. How are they doing? He said, zero.
Yeah.
And I said, I think we can help you. I think we can do it.
I remember you
Never met him in my life.
You
And
got
this was
a lot of private money in there.
it was a Thursday, and by Tuesday we had raised all the money.
Yes.
And but
That was in the billions, as I remember.
it was 1.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's a lot of money to raise in 5
it
days.
was in that period of time. But,
Sure.
but the piece we're missing is the Prem Watsa piece, who I met at a Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting. And so when you think about Kennedy Wilson today,
Yeah.
so much credit has to go to Prem. Because we've now done $18 billion of joint ventures together.
Transformative.
Every one. And
It started modestly, though, as I remember.
you've got a good memory, I'll tell you. Yeah, it did.
It started relatively modestly.
It was modest, but if you remember in the Great Recession, there was no capital.
No, that was why you did the SPAC.
That's why I did it.
There was no capital for anybody.
You couldn't raise capital.
No.
And so he gave us, after the Berkshire meeting, he said, "Come, if you're ever in Toronto, come and see me." This was a Saturday. And I somehow figured out I could be in Toronto the next week.
Amazing.
Amazing, right? What a coincidence.
Amazing.
And so I go up there and see him, and I had all these flip books, and we're like 15 minutes into the meeting.
You were over-prepared.
So over-prepared, like you always are.
I know. We had moments of that.
He says, "Okay, time out. Can you go in the other room with me?" There were like 20 people in the room. He says, "Go in the other room with me."
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I explained to him, I said, "Look, I need some more equity in KW.
To infuse the balance sheet.
Yeah." And he says, "Okay, fine, that's fine. How much?" I tell him, he says, "That's fine." And I said, "Okay, but if you're going to do that, I need a separate account that we can invest out of. How much?" And since I hadn't rehearsed any of this, I told him the number that came into my mind.
Yeah.
And he said, "Wow, that seems like a lot." And
I'm sure it had 9 or more figures in it.
and a 5 in front of it.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And he said, "That seems like a lot to start."
Yeah.
And so he said, "How about we do half?" And I said, "Okay, that's fine."
Oh, you settled for half.
Yeah. And so.
And he was really becoming kind of the Warren Buffett of Canada in a way.
He is the kindest, smartest business human being I've ever met in my life. And like everything you've done, Bob, it's evolved to the point where we can make decisions with each other, and I'm not kidding, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
When we bought the bank portfolio in 2023,
Yeah.
Which,
PWB loan portfolio.
yeah, it was $5.7 billion. That whole conversation,
With Matt.
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
That was another transformative moment, which really put you back in a big way in the banking business, which now you're one of the largest construction and bridge lenders in the country.
Yeah.
Overnight.
Luck. No, but
I think it was cultivating. You're not giving yourself enough credit. I think you've cultivated relationships through good and bad times, where there's a high level of trust, Bill.
Well, Bob, it's been the secret of your business and the secret of my business.
Well, I learned it from the master.
How do you create relationships inside the company and outside the company, and then how do you have a instinct if something makes sense to you to actually act on it?
So do you think, for younger people that watch this podcast, what would be the lesson learned there from your perspective? You've been in the business going on 5 decades here, banking and real estate. What's the lesson learned here, Bill?
Bob, I mean, there's so many. I mean, you and I could, go through a list of 10, but easily. But I think the main lesson is you really have to be willing to put yourself out there.
So you've got to be willing to get up at bat.
There's no there's things you need to do in the office, but there's no money to be made in the office.
Oh, I know. I remember that. Bob, what are you doing in the office?
Yeah, it's just you got to be out with people, and
Yeah.
then you got to when somebody says something to you, you have to listen carefully.
Yeah.
And then you can go away and process it, and then think, hey, maybe there's an idea there. And then you have to also have the conviction that when people are there's so many negative people that are always quarterbacking you in life. Oh, I don't think that's very smart, Bob. Why are you doing that, Bob? What's going on, Bob? Well, okay, are you willing to just say, okay, fine, I heard you, but I'm actually going to do it anyway. And so having the conviction, and
It's
then
conviction.
you're going to have so many moments in business where things are not going the way you want them. And do you have the perseverance to, I learned so much from luckily being involved in the Navy SEAL community.
I remember that started
They just,
over 15 years ago.
yeah, I got to know so many of these young men and their families, and they don't give up.
No, they don't. They're trained not to.
They're trained not to give up.
But you've been very involved in the transformative side of it, where they're helping their families and helping them readjust into the real world after the military. It's not easy.
I think it's one of the travesties of our country that
We don't take care of our veterans enough.
we don't take care of any service member, but particularly the military families that sacrifice so much for us. And they get out, and they're, especially like if they've been in for 15 years, now they're in their late 30s, and they don't know what to do. And now they've had this high, intense teamwork relationship with their brotherhood, and now they're just kind of kicked to the curb.
They
and
are.
So it's very hard adjustment.
And they have to readjust their expectations and their tempo. It's not easy, but I'm trying to remember. You got involved because our counsel at Kennedy Wilson, Kent Mouton,
Yep.
was very involved, but you took it to another level and really brought your whole network.
Well, I can't
into
remember
it.
if you were still at the company at the time, but we were doing these kind of annual 30 people
Yes.
get-togethers, and really they evolved into, my opinion, a waste of time. And I said to Kent one year, I said, I'd like to try to do something different. Do you have any ideas? And he said, why don't we go to Coronado and go on the Navy SEAL training base there and listen to how they view leadership and so on.
Wow.
And I was at dinner the first night we were down there, and I sat next to this admiral. And I said, it's none of my business, but, what do you pay these guys? And he told me, and I
Was
said,
it like 40 grand a year or something, or more?
it was nothing. And I
Yeah.
said, listen, I said, you're kidding me. And he kind of got mad at me.
That you would challenge that paradigm.
It was fine for him, he said. He said, I said, yeah, I know, but your house cost $20,000. So anyway, that was how I got involved there. It was just another one of those lucky things.
Well, yes, but you made it a mission. Let's talk about a couple other things that are very near and dear to you. One is all the work you've done in the state of Hawaii, and I want to talk a little bit about USC because it's been a part of your life for most of it, for over 5 decades.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Hawaii first. You had a vision. You always loved Hawaii. You loved the water. You're a great paddler. I remember even before I was at Kennedy Wilson in the early 2000s, you really wanted to deepen your relationship with the state of Hawaii and the people there. And it took a lot to do that first development, the Kohaniki development, that other people would have folded. I mean, the entitlement process, the local politics, there were just so many difficult aspects of it, including capitalization. Mm-hmm. Maybe talk a little bit about your vision for Hawaii.
Came out of Japan.
Yes, out of the REO world, right?
Well, a Japanese bank had decided to find another person to own the properties that this one borrower had.
And it was about 400 or 500 acres, as I remember.
It was 3,000.
Was it that big?
Yeah, because there were 3 separate properties.
Okay, I'm only focusing on the
And
main campuses.
they called me on the they said, we'd like to sell you the properties in this case, one loan, which was on Kohana'iki. And I said, okay. I said, how much was the loan?
Had you gone to see it?
No, it was on the telephone.
Yeah, this is like late 90s, as I remember.
This was 1997.
Yeah, because when I joined the company in 2000, you were starting to think about
and
what to do.
he said, okay, there's 1,000 acres above the airport, 2,000, it was 1,500 or so, no, it was 2,000 acres out by Monolani, and then 500 acres on the beach. And having grown up in Malibu and knowing the value of oceanfront,
Yeah.
I said, 500 acres on the beach. And he said, yeah. And I said, how much is the loan? And he told me, and I said, how much do you want for it? And he told me that, and I said, I'll tell you, I'll buy it. And so that over the phone, without even seeing it, I bought it. But I had to get the money to buy it.
Yes.
And so we did. And but it was the beginning of an incredible journey because it was a lava field and unentitled.
It was the biggest earth-moving project in the country at one time.
Yeah, it was
Because
crazy.
you had to create the land.
It was crazy.
It was. We all thought. I said, "Bill, is everything okay here?"
Yeah, but like you, I'm a handshake guy, and I
Yeah.
went and met the mayor of the island with Dave Eady.
Yeah.
And Harry said, I'll support this, but first thing you got to do is find 25 people out of the community that will all agree on your plan.
So there's a linkage there. I see linkage with Japan, with Ireland, and with Hawaii.
Oh, but
I'll never forget when you sent me on the mission to meet the Polynesian hero who sailed across the ocean, and you were helping build a boat for him.
you were there?
You sent me up to the Navy Yard with our attaché there, the big
Kaleo.
guy. Kaleo, yes. Bob, go see what's going on there.
You guys, this is such a funny story.
What's going
there's a
on
guy,
there? How am I spending my money here, Bob?
in the South Pacific who's a legend in the South Pacific because he is the first person that was able to sail everywhere in the South Pacific with no instruments.
Yeah.
And
Across the open ocean.
across the open ocean. And so Bob and I got involved in helping reconstruct his original sailing canoe.
Yeah, it was a huge boat.
His name was Mao. Mao had 57 children on different islands. He was really a legend.
That's why I needed a big boat, Bill.
So I remember he was so grateful, Bob, that you and I got involved in it. He sent me to my house this really kind of elaborate wrapping thing that he had somebody do. And I said, God, how could I ever repay him? And he said, he said, buy him a couple bottles of wild turkey.
Yeah.
I said,
I think you
"Okay."
bought him a boat.
So anyway, that was.
But the great thing that came out
was
of that
Hawaii.
was the mantra that we adopted at Kennedy Wilson, which is a saying, Imua, rowing in unison together.
Yeah, onward.
And I'll never forget, onward, in 2000, I think it was 2006, where you stepped up to the plate to help me, and you were the recipient of the Spirit of Life Award at Chrysalis, which was a transformative event that we held at the Disney Hall. And we were worried we were going to fill the room.
Remember that?
We overfilled the room, and I think we raised about $650,000. But I'll never forget the moment where your dear childhood friend Tom Barrack,
Yep.
I had asked him to
Right.
introduce you, and we're all looking at the clock because it was approaching about 9 o'clock by then. Is Tom going to really make it? Because the guy lived in a virtual world. I remember we had Mouton as the backup, but I remember the speech because he talked about how you've navigated the challenges of business. And he talked about the great concept of Imua and how you've worked in unison with people and local communities. And I think that's really been the thread, Bill.
Bob, you and I have so much common history, as I said at the beginning of this, and I think we certainly are handshake people, but we have a certain gene in our body that wants to work with other people and whatever the circumstances are, try to figure out Our only legacy at the end of the day is really how did you positively impact the lives of other people. That's it.
Is that how you want to be remembered?
What else is there?
Yeah.
I hope that my family thinks I've done a few things for them, and then what impact did you have on the rest of the world? And since you and I came from nothing, and we understand the luck that we had, what do you do about it? And so I tell everybody at Kennedy Wilson, I said, look, I don't care whether it's time or money, you have to help other people. Not help, I hate that word. You've got to be involved with other people.
It's a form of help, but it's also reciprocal in the sense that you're receiving great satisfaction from it. Let's talk about USC, because you've been so involved as an alum, as a trustee, and now you're helping inner city children who have promise in academics but not the resources to figure out how to grow and become professionals where they don't have access to education. And I know the faculty has recognized you for that effort, you and Leslie, in your leadership. And it's really done a transformative, many good things for the community. Talk about that academic initiative that you're involved with.
It's been one of the greatest honors of my life. I met...
Isn't the event coming up soon?
It is in June. But I met a young person that was at one of the trustee meetings. They had a young person come in. God, I'm forgetting his name. Last name was Ramirez.
Justin or Jared?
I'm forgetting, sorry. Anyway, he talks about his life. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, this kid is unbelievable. So I went straight to the front of the room.
And this is when he was a student?
He was a student at NAI. And just as a way of background, NAI has 1,000 students in it, starting in the 6th grade to high school. And the objective is to prep them to get into college. And they're going to another high school, but they have to, after school, come to the NAI program. And on Saturday, their parents have to come. And these are the 2 campuses that we've built, one in East LA at the Keck Medical School and one on the USC campus.
So it gives them access.
Yeah, and so we have this incredible person, Kim, who's run this program
Executive
for 23
director.
years.
Wow.
But I got involved in 2016 when I met this kid.
Yes. Because you heard him at the trustee meeting.
It was just, we all complain about our lives. Sometimes listening to this story was just, it was...
Probably not a lot of positive stuff going on there.
So anyway, what happened, I just went to the guy, the head fundraiser, and I said, I got to be involved. And he said, okay, this is kind of the roadmap. And I said, I'm in. And so, we last year we graduated 95 kids.
From the program?
Yeah.
From local schools?
Yeah. They East LA, South Central, all got accepted to a 4-year college, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, and 55 got accepted to USC, where they go for free for 4 years.
Amazing.
Free.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so, but now we've got 200 kids at USC going for free. The first kid that I met just graduated from medical school at UCLA.
The one from the trustee meeting?
The first guy. Doctor now.
Amazing. So the Institute tracks their career progression.
We have an alumni association, and we expect that those younger people have to help the other younger people. And so it's the most rewarding thing I've ever been involved in, ever. Because you meet the parents on this graduation day, and you get in your car and shake your head.
Yeah, it creates a feeling inside that, for you, having grown up in a working class family with 9 brothers and sisters. I'll never forget how you told me you had to be quick to grab food from the lunch table because it'd be gone if you didn't.
Well, my wife always hated it when we first started going out because she said, "You eat so fast." I said, "That's how I was trained."
Exactly. Well, Bill, you've been building a better community for a lot of people for a long time. And so what's the future? What's going on next for Kennedy Wilson? I see you're doing a lot of alignments with international institutions for capital. You're deep into the loan space. What's new?
Like you, we're focused on housing. And
Housing.
We've got between what we're financing for other people and what we own, we've got 70,000 units that we're involved in. And we have 40 of them that we have an equity interest in and 30 that we're financing.
And many of which you've gotten involved in the affordable space too.
We have almost 15,000 units in the affordable and senior space, and we're buying another company in another part of the United States right now. So we're trying to grow that business. So but we're trying to, you were smarter than me. I got in all kinds of different products in the, office and retail, and you stayed focused, and I'm trying to get back to where you are, where I'm focused on one simple product, and everything else.
Well, the housing space has an insatiable demand in this country.
It's everywhere in the world.
Particularly workforce.
It's the biggest issue in the world. We have a great single-family homes for rent business now in the United Kingdom.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we started that last year with CPPIB, the big Canadian pension.
Well, it's interesting because you were really at the front end when we went to Ireland on transforming professionalism into rentership, because there really was no management system. It was all individuals renting condominiums or social housing.
Well, I took the things that you did, Bob. There were no amenities in the projects there.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as a leasing office.
No.
And so it wasn't like I had some genius ideas. We put a gym in. we opened a leasing office.
But it was the fact that you did it.
Yeah, well.
It was the fact that you did it.
It was those things. The early days with you were, transformative for me in a lot of ways.
I remember I used to bring you to the sites.
Oh my God.
I brought you to that project, that crazy project we did up in Alameda that was empty
we owned
Coast Guard
twice.
housing.
Yeah.
And you looked at me and said, "Bob, I definitely think you're out of your mind." I finally convinced there's something missing here in your head.
Oh, I got out.
It was a zero cap.
I got out of the car and I said.
And somebody was screaming at you, I remember.
There was a guy in a car who wasn't screaming very nice things at me.
No.
And he said that he had gotten thrown out of the building and all of his stuff was still inside the building.
Yeah.
I said, "Have at it." But you got me. We
did some pioneering stuff. We went into neighborhoods that probably wouldn't go into today.
Bob. You took me down a path.
I took you to Paramount. I took you to Panorama City.
I don't even want to. We shouldn't say where, but I mean, there were some where I would just get in the car and I go, "What in the hell is this guy thinking about?"
I remember.
But you always ended up having success with them.
Somehow we figured it out.
We figured it out.
And you're a great believer and a great supporter and a great mentor, Bill. And I'm so glad that things are going well through some. Again, we're dealing with another time of uncertainty here.
Yeah.
But we're navigating.
Look, pal, I love you. I love the time that we had together. I'm proud of what you've been able to build.
Thank you, Bill.
It's not easy to do what you do. It all looks easy, but it's not.
It's not.
And so.
But the key is to be positive, right?
You try your best.
You do.
You know, every moment of every day can't be like you're in Disneyland, but you try your best.
Try your best.
Yeah.
Well, Bill McMorrow, chairman of Kennedy Wilson, and we're going on year number 37.
That's true.
And you're still running strong, Bill. Great to have you.
Brian.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Bobby.